The sun blazed overhead, casting its golden light on a scene of quiet triumph. A black man stood proudly over his newly built garden, the rich earth beneath him a testament to weeks of labor, vision, and hope. This wasn't just soil, it was possibility made tangible. He had poured himself into this project, researching which plants would thrive best in his corner of the world, planning meticulously, dreaming endlessly. To him, the garden was more than rows of flowers and vegetables. It was a sanctuary carved out of chaos, a refuge where he could nurture life as an act of creation. Each bloom that unfurled, each sprout pushing through the dirt, was a reminder of what he could build with his own hands, a personal paradise born from patience and care. Every morning, he stepped outside to breathe in the scent of fresh soil and budding greenery. His fingers moved with precision, ensuring every plant received exactly what it needed: water, sunlight, attention. Watching the colors burst forth, the fiery reds of geraniums, the lush greens of tomato vines, filled him with a deep sense of peace. For the first time in years, he felt whole. Here, amidst the hum of bees and the rustle of leaves, he found joy untethered by the weight of the outside world. But across the street, hidden behind the veil of her kitchen curtains, Karen watched with narrowed eyes. She had lived here for decades, long enough to consider this neighborhood hers. Over the years, neighbors had come and gone, but none had unsettled her like the man tending the vibrant garden now flourishing before her. It wasn't merely his skin color. It was something deeper, sharper. It was the audacity of his presence, the way he seemed so at ease, so unbothered by boundaries she believed were unspoken yet absolute. Her gaze lingered on him as he knelt among the plants, planting another row of flowers with evident pride. Her stomach churned. How dare he? How dare he take ownership of something so beautiful, so alive, in a place she deemed too sacred, or perhaps too familiar, for someone like him? The thought gnawed at her, festering until bitterness consumed her entirely. In her mind, the garden became more than plants and flowers. It was defiance rooted in her territory, a challenge to everything she held dear. And if he refused to leave quietly, then maybe she could make him wish he had never arrived. An idea began to take shape, dark and insidious. What if the garden disappeared? What if all that effort, all that beauty, crumbled under her touch? Poison. That's all it would take. Something strong enough to kill the roots, the stems, the very essence of what he had worked so hard to grow. But even as she imagined the wilting leaves and blackened soil, she knew it wouldn't stop there. Destroying the garden meant destroying him. His defiance, his audacity, it all needed to go. For days, she plotted, observing his routines with predatory focus. When he left for work early one morning, leaving the garden bathed in sunlight, she saw her chance. With trembling anticipation, she grabbed a bottle of industrial-strength pesticide and slipped out her back door. Across the street she crept, her heart pounding not with fear, but with a twisted satisfaction. The soft grass muffled her steps as she approached the garden. As she looked upon the riot of color and life he had cultivated, a cruel smile spread across her face. This was her moment. She unscrewed the cap of the pesticide, the sharp chemical odor rising into the air. Every movement was deliberate, calculated. She intended to savor this, the destruction of his haven, his pride, his defiance. She had no intention of showing mercy. With calculated precision, she aimed the nozzle at the nearest plant and unleashed a torrent of lethal liquid. The poison sprayed across the leaves, and she watched with cold satisfaction as they began to wither almost instantly. A rush of exhilaration surged through her, intoxicating, empowering. Moving from one plant to the next, she drenched them mercilessly in the pesticide. Vibrant blooms that once radiated life now drooped and crumbled under her assault. Vegetables, once promising bountiful harvests, curled inward as the toxin took hold. She could almost hear their silent cries for air, choking beneath her relentless attack. Karen didn't stop there. Every inch of soil, every last sprout, was coated in destruction. Her goal was clear: ensure the entire garden would perish slowly, painfully. When he returned home, all he'd find would be desolation, the remnants of what he had poured his heart into building. As she worked, she cast furtive glances over her shoulder, vigilant against prying eyes. But the street remained eerily quiet, the oppressive silence amplifying the weight of her actions. With one final spray over the last patch of earth, she watched the liquid seep into the ground, sealing the fate of every living thing it touched. Stepping back, Karen surveyed the devastation with a self-satisfied smirk. The garden was obliterated, his pride, his sanctuary, reduced to nothing but death and decay. In her twisted mind, this was only the beginning. With a parting glance at the now barren landscape, she turned on her heel and strode back to her house, a peculiar sense of triumph swelling within her. She had made her point. To her, he no longer belonged here, not with something so beautiful thriving in his yard. Returning to her window, she waited, anticipation simmering as she envisioned his reaction upon discovering the carnage she'd wrought. The garden was gone, and with it, a vital fragment of his identity. The poison had done its job, and she had no plans to relent. Wade pulled into his driveway after a long day. Eager for solace, unease struck him immediately. The vibrant hues of his flowers were absent, replaced by sagging, lifeless stems. His once lush green vegetable plants were now sickly yellow and brown, their vitality extinguished. A harsh chemical odor hung heavy in the air, stinging his nostrils. His stomach churned as dread settled in. Rushing toward the wreckage, he knelt down, brushing brittle, shriveled petals with trembling fingers. The soil was moist, but not from water. Something far more sinister had soaked into the earth. His mind raced. Was it an accident? Disease? No, this was too sudden, too thorough. Someone had done this deliberately. Slowly rising to his feet, his jaw tightened as his gaze swept the surroundings. Deep down, he already knew who was responsible. He'd noticed Karen before, always glaring from behind her curtains, sneering when he greeted neighbors, muttering complaints about certain people moving into the neighborhood. Though he couldn't prove anything yet, anger simmered just beneath the surface. Sleep eluded him that night. Fury burned alongside a desperate need for answers. He needed proof. By morning, he'd resolved to stay home. If someone had destroyed his garden, they might return to finish the job. Positioning himself near the window, careful to remain unseen, he waited. Hours dragged by, the stillness broken only by the occasional breeze casting long shadows over his ruined plants. Just as doubt began creeping in, movement caught his eye. It was Karen. She moved with calculated caution, her eyes scanning the area like a predator assessing its surroundings. In her hand, she clutched a bottle, familiar and damning. The very same pesticide he had suspected all along. His pulse quickened as his suspicions solidified into certainty. There she was, kneeling beside his already lifeless plants, dousing them with more poison. But why? Was this some twisted act of vengeance to ensure nothing remained alive? Then, something inside him snapped. As Karen pressed the nozzle again, saturating the wilted remnants of what were once vibrant greenery, she chuckled softly to herself. "Damn monkey," she muttered under her breath, shaking her head in disdain. Those words ignited a firestorm within him. His jaw tightened, teeth grinding together like stones against one another. His fists clenched so hard that his knuckles turned white. It wasn't mere vandalism. It was hatred, pure, unfiltered malice. This wasn't just about killing plants anymore. She was sending a message, loud and clear. He'd seen enough. With quiet determination, he grabbed his phone and began documenting everything. The toxic ritual, her smug demeanor. Every click of the camera felt like justice inching closer. He slipped toward the front door, careful not to alert her. No, this wouldn't end with a confrontation on his own terms. Someone like Karen didn't deserve to slither away unnoticed. Not this time. It was time to bring in reinforcements. His fingers trembled, not from fear, but from fury, as he dialed 911. The operator's voice came through calm and steady, though it barely registered over the pounding rush of blood in his ears. "My neighbor just vandalized my property," he said, forcing his voice to remain even despite the storm raging inside him. "She's been poisoning my garden for 2 days now and making racist comments while doing it." The operator asked for details, prompting him to recount everything succinctly: photos, videos, audio recordings, all undeniable proof. This wasn't just property damage. This was a hate crime. Within moments, the wail of sirens pierced the tranquility of the neighborhood, slicing through the stillness like a blade. Karen, oblivious to the impending reckoning, continued her work, humming faintly to herself. When the police car pulled up, he wasted no time stepping outside. Pointing directly at her, he declared firmly, "There she is. That's her." Karen's head whipped around, her expression morphing rapidly from shock to outrage. "What the hell is going on?" she barked, standing abruptly. One of the officers approached her, his stance authoritative yet composed. "Ma'am, we received a report that you've been trespassing and destroying private property. Do you have anything to say about that?" Karen's lips curled into an exaggerated smirk, a mockery of innocence. "Trespassing? Destroying property? Are you serious?" Her laughter rang out sharp and brittle, echoing awkwardly in the tense air. "This is ridiculous. I was just..." She trailed off mid-sentence, her gaze darting guiltily to the bottle still clutched in her hand. The officer followed her eyes, his expression darkening instantly. "Ma'am, put the bottle down." Her scoff was laced with defiance, but she complied, setting it carefully onto the grass. "This is absurd. I was trying to help. His garden was dying anyway." "I thought." "You thought what?" he interjected, stepping forward. His voice was measured, controlled, but beneath it simmered a volcano of rage waiting to erupt. The unmistakable truth hit hard. She had poisoned my plants again. I overheard what she called me, and Karen's face turned a deep crimson. "Oh, come on," she scoffed, turning to the officers. "You don't actually believe this nonsense, do you? It's all a misunderstanding. He's just trying to make me look bad." One officer folded his arms, his tone steady but firm. "Sir, do you have any proof of what she's saying?" The man nodded, pulling out his phone without hesitation. He pressed play, and Karen's voice filled the air, loud and clear. "Damn monkey." Her smirk evaporated instantly. One officer shook his head, reaching for his handcuffs. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for vandalism, trespassing, and committing a hate crime." Karen's eyes widened in panic. Wait, no. You can't be serious. This is a mistake. He's lying." But the officer ignored her protests, spinning her around and securing her wrists with practiced precision. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As Karen thrashed, her face contorted in fury, she locked eyes with the man who stood silently watching. Venom laced her words as she spat at him. "You did this to me. You set me up." For the first time since discovering his dead garden, the man exhaled deeply, his fists unclenching. He didn't need to utter a single word. The truth had spoken for itself. Justice was finally being served. The cuffs tightened around Karen's wrists as she twisted and writhed in defiance. Her wild gaze darted between the two officers, her expression a volatile mix of rage and fear. "This is a setup," she shrieked. "You're all against me. This is my neighborhood." The officers remained stoic. One reached for his radio to report the arrest, but before he could, Karen's breathing hitched. Her eyes locked onto the pesticide bottle, still lying on the grass. Without warning, she lunged forward, snatching it up. Trembling fingers fumbled with the nozzle as desperation took hold. "You want to take me down?" she screamed, aiming the bottle at the nearest officer. "Let's see how you like it." The officer barely had time to react. His partner, however, moved with lightning speed. A sharp crack echoed through the air as thousands of volts surged through Karen's body. She let out a strangled gasp, her limbs jerking uncontrollably. The pesticide bottle flew from her grip, spilling its toxic contents across the pavement. Like a rag doll, she collapsed, lifeless for a moment. The only sound was the faint crackle of the taser finishing its work. Then silence. The man stood frozen, exhaling slowly. He had expected Karen to argue, cry, maybe even curse him out, but to attack the police? It was as if something inside her had snapped completely. One officer stepped cautiously forward, kneeling beside her limp form. "She's out," he muttered, checking her vitals. "She'll wake up soon." The other sighed, shaking his head. What a damn mess. Moments later, Karen's eyes fluttered open. Confusion clouded her features, her breaths ragged and uneven. She tried to move, but realized she was restrained. Reality crashed down on her all at once. She wasn't in her yard anymore. The flashing red and blue lights reflected in her widened pupils. She was going to jail. "No," she whispered hoarsely, shaking her head violently. No. This isn't right. He set me up. It's his fault." But no one listened. As the officers hauled her to her feet, she thrashed weakly, her energy drained. The weight of her actions bore down on her. Yet even as she was shoved into the back of the police car, one thought consumed her. She wasn't going down without a fight. The courtroom buzzed with tension. Reporters lined the back, scribbling furiously in their notebooks. The man sat stoically in the front row, arms crossed, his gaze unwavering. Karen stood before the judge, transformed. Gone was the arrogance, the cruelty, replaced now by sheer desperation. Her once perfectly styled blonde hair was frizzy and unkempt, her designer clothes traded for an orange jumpsuit. Yet her voice remained shrill, piercing the room like a siren. "Your Honor, please," she sobbed, clasping her hands together. "I didn't mean to do it. The devil, he took over me. I wasn't in my right mind." The judge, an older woman with a hardened expression, flipped through the case file, unmoved. "You mean to tell me," she said slowly, her voice dripping with skepticism, "that the devil made you trespass onto your neighbor's property, poison his garden, call him a racial slur, and then attempt to assault 2 police officers?" Karen sniffled dramatically, nodding vigorously. "Yes, I wasn't myself. I've never done anything like this before. Please, Your Honor, I have kids, a family. I can't go to prison." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Your record says otherwise." She held up a document. Multiple complaints from neighbors, a history of harassment, and now, she paused, emphasizing each word, a hate crime charge. Karen's face twisted in horror. "No, this isn't fair. He set me up." She spun suddenly, locking eyes with the black man seated in the audience. Her expression darkened, venom seeping into her voice. "You," she hissed. "You did this to me." The man didn't flinch. He simply stared back, unshaken. Karen tried one last plea. "Your Honor, please. I swear I'm not a bad person." The judge sighed, then straightened. "Karen Thompson, you've been found guilty of trespassing, vandalism, inciting hate crimes, and assaulting law enforcement officers." Karen's breath caught in her throat as the judge delivered the verdict. "For these offenses, I sentence you to 5 years in state prison." A sob escaped her lips. No, this couldn't be real. She lunged forward, desperation clawing at her chest, but the bailiffs seized her arms, holding her firmly in place. "Please," she begged, her voice trembling. 5 years? You can't do this. It'll ruin my life." The judge met her plea with an icy glare. "Perhaps you should have considered that before poisoning your neighbor's garden." As Karen was dragged from the courtroom, her screams ricocheted off the walls, filling the space with a chilling echo. Just before the heavy doors swallowed her whole, she twisted her head one final time, locking eyes with the man seated quietly behind the prosecution table. Pure venom burned in her gaze, a silent promise of retribution. But then she was gone. The man exhaled slowly, the weight on his shoulders easing for the first time in what felt like forever. This victory wasn't just his. It belonged to every person who had ever endured bullying, mistreatment, or degradation at the hands of someone like Karen. Justice had spoken. Weeks later, he stood in his yard, the earthy aroma of fresh soil rising around him. His garden thrived anew. Vibrant flowers bloomed, vegetables stretched toward the sun, and life pulsed through every leaf and stem. Karen had tried to destroy something precious, something beautiful. But instead of leaving ruin in her wake, she'd only given him a reason to rebuild stronger, better, brighter. Her hatred hadn't won. It had sparked renewal.